Okay. Good morning and welcome everyone to this remote meeting of the Lewis District Council Audit and Standards Committee on Monday 8th of March. I'm Councillor Julian Peterson, Chair of the committee. In a moment, I'll invite my fellow committee members to introduce themselves. I will ask officers who are in attendance to present reports and respond to any questions from members, and to introduce themselves at the start of their reports before speaking. Just a few pointers before we start. Please can I ask everyone to mute their microphones when they're not speaking. If you have connectivity issues, you may find it helpful to turn your camera off when not speaking. Please can you make sure that you have turned off your mobile phones, and note that these should not be used during the meeting unless you're joining the meeting by phone. Please can all councillors and officers clearly state their name each time they speak so that it is clear who is speaking. Can you also please indicate when you have finished making your contribution so I know I can move on. Finally, if any councillor wishes to speak, please use the raise hand icon on Teams. I can see you and will call you to speak in turn. I'll now take agenda items 1, 2 and 3 together. I now ask my fellow committee members to introduce themselves to listeners via the roll call. Councillors, please can you confirm your full name, indicate if you're acting as a substitute, which you're not, and state if you need to make any declaration of interest on an item on the agenda. If so, please state the nature of the declaration. Councillor Stephen Gauntlet.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Councillor Stephen Gauntlet, and I have no items of interest to declare. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Christine Brett. Can't hear you. I still can't hear you. You're muted.
Apologies, Chair.
That's okay.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Councillor Christine Brett and I have no interest to declare in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roy Berman.
Good morning, Chair. It's Councillor Roy Berman. I too have no items of interest to declare in this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Davis. You're muted.
Good morning, Councillor Phil Davis. I have no items of interest to declare in this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Ross.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Adrian Ross. I have no interest to declare with respect to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Christine Robinson.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Councillor Christine Robinson and I have no interest to declare any items on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will note here that in addition to the officers who will be presenting reports later, we have the Democratic Services Officer, Jennifer Norman, who in attendance, and other Democratic Services officers are assisting in the background of this meeting. I'll now take agenda item 4, the minutes, pages 5 to 8. Councillors, do you wish me to sign the minutes of the last meeting of 18th of January 2020 as a correct office record? I'll assume they are agreed unless anyone present wishes to speak against them now. All okay? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Item 5, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 6, we now turn to written questions from councillors. None have been received. And item number 7, the external audit of the 2018-19 statement of accounts. Be a verbal update. I would like to invite the council's Deputy Chief Finance Officer, Corporate Finance, Ola, and the council's external auditor, Deloitte, to give a verbal update on this item. Thank you.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair. I'm Ola Owolabi, the Deputy Chief Finance Officer. The item before the committee is to provide an update on the ongoing external audit of 2018-19 Statement of Account. This is one area where we provided an update in November and at the January meeting. Following the January meeting, we've been engaging and working with the auditors to be able to provide us with the list of outstanding issues, because this is something that was made reference to during the November meeting, that we need to complete those issues before we can draw a line under 18-19 account. Since then, I think we've been chasing and having discussion with them to produce this list. Because we are not getting those lists in time, these issues were escalated to the senior director at Deloitte. Therefore, on the 10th of Feb, we had a meeting with Deloitte senior directors. And when I say we, that was the Chief Executive, Rob, the Chief Finance Officer, Omira, and myself with Deloitte. Deloitte was represented by Ben and their senior partner, Craig. And we just want to ensure that we manage whatever is going on, and the escalation was done in a very, very cordial way. Rob, the Chief Executive, made it clear to Deloitte that members are not happy with the current state of play, and he challenged them in terms of coming up with a deadline, with a timescale when this audit will be put to bed. I think during the discussion, we managed to get a lot of ifs and what from Deloitte. Everything is mainly due to lack of resources, and COVID-19 is having a significant impact on them. And the main actions we agree at that meeting is that there's now going to be a regular monitoring meeting, monthly monitoring meeting, to continue monitoring the progress and to be able to determine when we will be able to come to this committee and present you with the outcome of 18-19 account. And that is where we are as at the moment. And I will invite Ben to provide further update on the 18-19. Thank you. Hi, Ben. Good morning, Ben.
Thanks, Ola. As Ola had said, we've had a number of discussions on that front, and also with the finance team and our team going through on a number of the items that we thought we were waiting on, and resolving either what we'd received that would be addressing that, or receiving the additional items. We have staff booked from 22nd of this month to continue the audit. Clearly, we have testing to do in a number of these areas and on the items received, but we're now at the point that we are going to just start working through that with and completing testing in the remaining areas of the audit, and then depending on what matters arise and resolution of those, coming back to the committee with reporting on that.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Can I see anyone's hand? Councillor Christine Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Christine Robinson. So, Ben, can you give us some sort of idea as to when this will be finished? Because when this is going to be finished, you've now got to start on the 1920 audit. So what's the timescale on that? Because we can't start the new audit of 2021 until surely all these others have been finished. And the other thing is that I think we need to have a definite. Obviously, the other thing is, and Ola maybe have to answer this one. Has the bill for the audit for 2018-19 and 2019-20 been paid?
In terms of the bill for 1819, we tend to pay the agreed PSAA contractual fee. But however, what we are aware of is that in addition to that, there might be a variation to that fee, and that is yet to be determined.
Okay. So sorry, Chair, going back, what about 2019-20? Has that been paid?
Not yet.
Good. That's good.
Can I just add, in terms of 1920, the completion of 1819 will impact the 1920 account. As a result of that, we are still hanging on to the 1920 account. So once 1820 has been agreed, we can hopefully move the closing balances into the opening balances of the 1920. Due to where we are at the moment, we are sure that there will be comment from Deloitte which might impact 1819 that we need to take care of within 1920. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sheriff?
Yeah. So going to the other half of your question, Councillor. So we have a scheduling of staff, not 100% consistent to people because of college and leave, but over from March through September, currently scheduled for working on the audits of Lewis and Eastbourne, just running through, and the intention is to get through successively through the audits.
Thank you. Perhaps our committee would like to know if the list of outstanding issues will be made available to officers in the 2018-2019 audit, so it can be signed off. I mean, when can you get a list of those outstanding issues made available fairly quickly for officers so they can do their...
Well, so the items that we needed from Manager that asked for from work that had previously been done, I think we've got to agreed of which of those we still needed and which have been provided. Clearly, some of those have then consequent things that happen when our team come back and do testing. So if we receive a breakdown and we need to test items from that, we'll ask for a sample from a breakdown and so on. So that will then become a moving thing when we resume in a couple of weeks' time with teams together. But that's just the normal day-to-day process of moving things forward.
So that'll be in 2 weeks then.
Well, that the things that we need to do before we start, I think we've had that discussion. The sort of each day there will be some things we'll say. Can we have a breakdown of this? Can we have a support for this item, or we have this question? But that's just the normal process of doing an audit. It's not generating a sort of a separate list.
Okay. I'll just ask Ola a question, then go to Councillor Ross. Ola, are you happy with that?
I think I will say yes. However, the ongoing discussion with both Ben and Niram is that there are specific lists which we need to have. They call it outstanding list of audit issues. If there are any at all, it will be useful for officers to have that, and then we can draw a line under it. If there are none, hopefully they will just continue with the audit and raise any additional questions they might have with us. Thank you.
Okay. Has that been minuted, Jen? Okay, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ola and Ben. I'm greatly relieved to hear that so we do seem to have a list of all of the items that are outstanding and that there are regular meetings in place. So that's a big important step forward. I haven't heard the answer to Councillor Robinson's question around when the audit is going to be done. I realise that we don't know an answer to that, but I assume there must be a target date that we're working towards, so I'd like to know that. I'd like to know from Ben whether you are now getting the support and the information that you need to be able to do your work. You're getting from the council the work that you feel you need to do your work, or whether there are any issues that you see there that we can help you out with. And then finally, obviously, the 1920 audit isn't complete yet either. So do we have a similar list of the items that are required to complete the 1920 audit, please? Thank you.
So, I mean, taking those successively, we would look to be completing the work effectively in April, but it does depend whether there are anything comes up in testing the remaining items that is problematic and requires time for management to dig into and provide answers upon. The second question, I think, was about whether we're getting the information we need. Clearly, we've sort of put down tools that at a particular point have had a list of some items that we still needed, which we've kind of been going through with finance team to let teams start again. We will have questions once we are doing work again, some of which will, I'm sure, have easy answers and some of which might require a bit more support to get to answers to, and we will see those as we start doing that work. The third question, which was 1920 list. Yeah, so so the initial request list of items you require to start an audit is kind of a common list to where we'd had before. I'm sure we'll may have a couple of amendments to it from finalising the 1819 audit, but the kind of detailed questions will only come when we get the numbers for 1920. That's normal commencement to audit stuff. It's nothing problematic.
Okay, thank you. So that suggests you haven't started the 1920 audit at all yet.
That's correct. No. We've not received a draft account or ledger.
And is that now overdue? Should you have received a draft account by now?
We are correct.
I mean, the legalistic answer to that is yes, because there's process about when draft accounts should be published and so on. But outside of the local government setting, normally you only get the accounts after the preceding year, even if there had been a delay. So it's not an unusual circumstance.
I see. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was a little bit perturbed to hear there may be some additional costs. Now, that's like saying it's like how long is a piece of string? This is the public purse we're talking about here, and it'd be very remiss of us as members not to actually try to understand what these costs are going to be, because does it mean that the same thing is going to happen with the 2019-20 audit? Now, I understand what Ola just said, that the 18-19 has got to be signed off before you start the 19-20. But I am a little bit concerned about this sort of these costs. So, because I feel that this is something that should have been dealt with over a year ago. So why should we as a council have to take these costs on?
Could I ask, I know your questions aimed at Benjamin, and no doubt he will say, but could I ask first of all, Ola and possibly Hamira to answer that for you as a background?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ola Owolabi, Deputy Chief Finance Officer. And I think the external audit plan that was presented to the committee in the previous year alluded to the fact that there might be potential variation to the contract. And that was as a reason of delay, not having their papers in time. And that is what Deloitte stated in that audit plan. However, all those variation needs to be agreed with PSAA. I think it's not something that Deloitte will come back to us and just say, we are going to charge you additional 10,000, 15,000 or 20,000. There should be an agreement in terms of those variations with PSAA as well, which I'm sure Ben will add to that in terms of when would that likely to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the process with PSAA is a slightly bureaucratic one of going from actual time incurred on matters, and so the steps are to first agree that time has been incurred with council's officers, and then it goes through them for review and confirmation. And so effectively both council and PSAA need to both to comment and agree on items. The scale fee, that is the number that's set, is not something that is reached by negotiation with ourselves as to what we think the cost of doing an audit is. It is a number that PSAA has rolled forward from an exercise that was done more than a decade ago, and has not taken account of changes in between, and for which it effectively assumes perfection in delivery. So it assumes that there are no issues in the working papers or timeliness of what's received, and that problems don't arise. And so when anything does come up of accounting issues, of something being more complex or requiring rework and adjustment by management, and further looking at for us, then that comes in. The rates in the PSA contract are less than a fifth of what I would be charging a corporate for overrun time, and those are the rates.
Okay, thank you. Hamira, do you want to say anything on that?
Not at this point, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else want to add anything? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you, I was a little disturbed by the implication of Mr. Sheriff's last response, because it sounds as though they may be trying to adjust the datum levels for the hourly charge rate because they agreed a contract at what would be a fifth of their going rate. That wouldn't be a reasonable reason to be looking for additional cost.
No.
Could you clarify that, please?
Yeah, because the rates that are under the PSA contract are the rates. I mean, they are those. The hourly overrun adjustment is not something that has been set directly, but is something that PSAA determines. It has revised that for 2022. But otherwise had been set for had been fixed for a number of years. That is not something that we'd revisit. But what it does mean is that where there is incremental time incurred, that is something we need to discuss and agree on. But the rate at which it is reimbursed is not something that we revisit or can revisit.
Okay, so I think this committee, I mean, please acquiesce or say you agree. In short, basically, Hamira, our chief executive, and Ola met a senior partner of Deloitte's, and they will be meeting once a month to make sure there's progress. Progress with the 2018-2019 audit. I presume, well, and I'm presuming, and you can contradict me, Mr. Sheriff, that the 2018-19 audit will be completed as soon as possible now, and that there'll be sufficient resources to do so. Is that correct? Sorry, you're on.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Has everyone had their say now? And Mr. Sheriff, you know where we're coming from on this now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ola, for your report. We note. We note the contents of your report, and we'll move on to agenda item 8 now, external audit plan for 2020-21. I would like to just say before we go on to this that our next official meeting is in 26th of July. So if anything, I'm hoping that we'll have some good news by then. So we may need to have a report from officers before then, if that is possible. So I'd like to invite the Council's Deputy Chief Finance Officer, Ola. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering with your surname. I apologise. I do stutter sometimes. To present the report, which has been circulated as a supplement to the main agenda on behalf of the Chief Finance Officer. Thank you. Over to you, Ola. And
thank you, Chair. I'm Ola Owolabi, the Deputy Chief Finance Officer. The report in front of you is the external audit plan for 2021. And the main purpose is to inform the committee of the content. The plan itself is attached as Appendix 1, and it summarizes what Deloitte will be doing in terms of assessment of key risks, approach to the final audit, their process in terms of determining the audit opinion on LDC account, and their approach in terms of the opinion relating to conclusion of council arrangement for security, efficiencies, and effectiveness. We've touched on external audit fee earlier. The 2021 fee is at the moment agreed by PSAA as £35,742. That fee is similar to the fees for 1920. What tends to happen as part of audit plan is this is part of best practice. Before we get into a new financial year, it's best practice to bring the plan in terms of what we'll be doing in auditing that accounts to the committee for approval and to note it. However, the auditors has been through key risk, have reviewed previous year's account, identified areas where they think they need to focus on. Those areas include the completeness of accruals, provisions and related expenditures, property valuations. This is our asset. This is a material amount within our balance sheet. The management override of control, pensions valuations, and COVID-19 related accounting disclosures. And in terms of COVID-19, this is totally not unexpected, looking at what has been going on across the world and its impact on the council. The plan includes their audit timing. Ben made reference to that earlier. The expectation in terms of the audit is that we will have sufficient resource from 22nd of March 2021 through September 2021, which is good news. And hopefully that will allow Deloitte to complete all the outstanding audits, including 2021. It's good to just keep some sort of awareness in terms of what the government is doing to address the Redmond recommendation on approval of the account. One of the recommendations from Sir Redmond is that we need to move from July to September publication. And at the moment, the government, MHCLG, they are currently consulting on the timetable for 2021 and 2022. So there is a clear indication then that rather than signing off the account in July as previously planned, is highly likely to be signed off at the end of September. So the consultation has ended. I'm not aware of any announcement yet, but there is a clear indication that that date will be moving to the end of September. I think I will stop there and invite Ben to cover any major highlight within the plan. Ben.
Thank you, Ola. So in terms of our significant audit risks, areas we would expect to focus upon, subject to update of our risk assessment for matters arising from 1920 and from seeing your closing position for 2021, areas we'd expect would be around completeness of liabilities, around property valuations, about the risk of management override of controls. And we would also expect to be having more focus upon pension valuations and the various COVID-19 related accounting and disclosure matters that we've got set out within the paper. Ola touched on our work on value for money, which for 2021, there is a fairly significant change arising from the National Audit Office's new Code of Audit Practice for local audit, which moves us away from a situation where effectively there was a binary conclusion. Either a risk was identified and the auditor had an accept for or an adverse opinion on value for money arrangements in their audit report, or if you didn't identify a risk, there was relatively limited work. There is now a broader requirement to do work on all bodies and to, on the back of that, produce a commentary in a new document, the Auditor's Annual Report, which replaces the annual audit letter. So there will be a public commentary on arrangements that we would make on all bodies. I'll touch on the fee. The scale fee has not been updated centrally for the effect of that, nor has it been updated for the impact of some auditing standard changes in the year, and PSAA has said that that is for identification of the impact organisation by organisation, and then to be dealt with by fee variation rather than through the scale fees. That's a sort of example of how that operates. We have, we included in the paper summary of items on areas where COVID impacts upon your accounts and upon judgments that officers will need to take in the preparation of those accounts and areas which we would have greater focus upon. And there's several pages of detail here on areas of significant risk and the backing behind those of what we would be looking at. I think that probably covers the key matters. We'll take any questions from members.
Okay. Any questions, councillors? No? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Ben and Ola. Excuse my ignorance. So this proposal here, this is just the proposal for completing the audit for 2021 that we're still in the process of completing for 18-19, and also that we need to do 19-20. It's just the next iteration of that same audit. Is that? Obviously, some tweaks, some different areas to look at, but essentially it's the next iteration of that audit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this audit won't be able to start, from what you said before, you've been unable to start the 19-20 audit because you haven't completed the 18-19. So this isn't as unlikely to start for quite a long time, because you need to complete the 18-19, then you need to complete 19-20, and only then will this work actually commence, correct?
Yeah, this would be late summer for this work.
Late summer. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Davis.
Good morning, Ben. Councillor Phil Davis. With regard to the risks that you've identified there, how do you arrive at them? Do you prepare standard risk matrices in conjunction with the officers or another method?
There are a couple of required risks under auditing standards. So the risk of management override of controls is a required risk under auditing standards. There is a presumed risk of fraud in revenue recognition, which then for all audits, which then the guidance for public sector bodies suggests may be in expenditure rather than revenue, because obviously your income streams are very different to those of a business, and so effectively we've identified that risk on the completeness of your expenditure side, and the property valuation risk is a risk that is pretty universal across council audits and many public sector audits, because of holding assets at valuation and them being a significant risk. Now, beyond that, in our planning work and discussions with officers, we would understand one-off and unusual transactions or other matters that are problematic. So if there's been an issue in an authority during the year, or if there's been a major acquisition, or things like that, then that would identify additional areas of risk within that. And to some extent, the list of COVID items are a list of things that are unusual, affecting not just this council, but most authorities in this year, and so areas where there is greater focus upon them. So it's a kind of a mix of things which are fairly common across the sector, or which are new accounting issues for the sector in the year, and things that are organisation specific within them.
Okay, so there's no method or process of establishing the risk factor for all key areas in a council.
So within our audit planning approach, there is a series of steps of consideration of each of your balances and identification of audit risks and responses for those, and risk rating to them. But that the items which get listed as being significant risks, and which therefore or more unusual items which we therefore tend to end up being the ones we are talking to this committee about, almost sits before you get to that step. So we haven't done that detailed risk assessment which we ultimately finalise based on your 2021 numbers at this point, but the sort of bigger picture, what are the key matters, what are the key issues in terms of scale, that bit we can do before we've done that balance by balance step.
Okay, I've had a lot of experience in this area over the last 40 odd years, and normally we produce matrices for it. Is your approach out of the standard model or not?
I want to also when you're so the sort of the collaborative determination of a risk matrix is something which usually happens in an internal audit context with management of identification of a risk universe. The external auditor's risk assessment is a risk assessment for the external auditor, but clearly, involving a lot of discussion and consideration matters with management and seeing evidence, etc., that they'd provide. But that the format of that is a list of all of your balances and risks against audit assertions and our assessment of that. So there is a matrix that is there. I'm just not sure I'm not sure whether it's the one you're thinking of.
Okay, well, any longer. Thanks for the explanation, Ben.
Okay, I would just like, yeah, I'm not on mute. So I'd just like a bit of clarification on this. Mr. Sheriff, are you likely, so when realistically do you think you'll finish the 18-19 audit, realistically?
So I would have thought April is the time for the 18-19 to complete. If there are not significant, if there's nothing significantly problematic or requiring significant revision to the accounts by management, because otherwise the time they would take that would be when we would be looking to complete that. Clearly, there needs to be a little bit of time for management to update and prepare 1920 books, and you know, I would, and for us then to move on to 1920.
So when do you realistically think the 1920 audit will be completed?
So I would think that it is likely to be into July, because the overall, given some time for closing the book, you know, updating books and reconciliations, and then us starting. I would have thought we'd be starting that into June, but it might have been sooner.
So you reckon that you could get the 1920 audit done in a couple of months, really, with plain sailing?
Yeah, I mean, everything is dependent upon both the quality of the documentation and information provided, and whether there are issues within that. But yes.
And then you're saying, if I heard you right, you may get the 2021 audit done by September, did you say?
Well, so we have booked staff through from March to September. Clearly, what issues and progress might lead us to tweaking the timing on that. The target that MHCLG has consulted upon is a September target for the 2021 audits. They've had a mix of responses in those consultation, and whether they will have a September deadline or later, we don't yet know. Hopefully we will know soon, because it's obviously March of 21 now, and so you know, they need to provide that information to councils and their auditors of when the dates are. But the at present, what they've been consulting on is that authorities only had a requirement to publish their draft 21 accounts in August, and the audit to complete in September, which is a set of dates that as a national timetable doesn't work. So what will come from that as a national set of dates, we don't yet know.
Okay. I'll just let that sink in. Councillor Robinson, then Ola, may I?
Thank you, Chair. A question for Ola, if I may, please. Are you confident that as soon as the 2018-19 audit has been completed, any costs that have been incurred, what was it you called it, the additional fees of the overruns, that will obviously have to be incorporated into 2019-20 accounts? Are you quite confident that you would be happy to go and for Deloitte to start as soon as they possibly can? Thank you, Chair.
Definitely. I think with 1920 is ready, but we know, based on the discussion we've been having with Deloitte, there might be few tweaks to 1819, and whatever the tweaks, we don't want that to delay the audit of 1920. So we might as well ensure, as soon as 1819 has been signed off, update 1920 document with those tweaks, and that will actually allow a smooth audit of 1920 by Deloitte. So, oh, definitely.
Oh, well, fingers crossed. I'm not a betting man, but has anyone else got anything they'd like to say about this?
My final comment on that is to do with timing and commitment to those what they've got within the external audit plan. If 1819 can be put to bed in April, then there will be the possibility of calling a meeting of the committee sometimes in May to sign that off. If July meeting, which we've got already, there is a possibility we can use July meeting for 1920. That depends on the progress. And we've, at the moment, got a meeting scheduled probably last week in September. That hopefully will be the meeting to be able to look into 2021. And I think what is important, which I'm sure Ben is aware of, is that commitment to let us have the resources from 22nd of March and to try and keep the same audit team. One of the reasons why this delay has happened is changing of auditors, and as soon as you change one auditor to another one, then you're back to square one to start again. If we can keep the same faces, the same team, that tends to help the process immensely. And most of the timeline that we're talking about at the moment, we can easily achieve that if you only have the same team dealing with all those accounts, because they will have the experience of dealing with 1819. That experience will be carried over into 1920, and that experience will be useful in terms of putting 2021 to bed. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I call Councillor Ross, is the committee happy to support those comments by Ola? Because I think it's incredibly important. Is that yes? Everyone's saying yes? Okay, thank you. Councillor Ross, thank you, Ola.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely support that. A question I meant to ask earlier, lots of a quick one, hopefully. Just wanted to confirm that these timescales for completing the audits are the same for Lewis District Council and for Eastbourne Borough Council. I'm presuming essentially you're doing them together, but it's not a specific Lewis District problem. Can I confirm that first, and then maybe you can have another question, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that run of staffing is for both of them. There'll be a bit of overlap in time.
And Eastbourne Borough Council are in the same situation, with still waiting for their 1819 accounts to be completed. Is that right, Ben?
Yes, I mean they are ahead because we received their draft accounts in line with the national timetable in 19 rather than in November 19, which was so we were able to do work on them in line with normal timing.
So sorry, a follow up on that one then, Ola or Hamira, why were the accounts for Eastbourne produced before those for Lewis District?
The account 1819 account for Eastbourne, I think that was, we're talking about 2019 here, definitely before my time. That was put through and in line with the deadline, statutory deadline. However, because of the changes in terms of staffing, resources, officer-wise within Lewis, that delayed the submission slightly. And there are one or two systems issues that needs to be addressed within Lewis that actually caused a bit of delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
Yeah, I mean, not to rehash it completely, but obviously having been here, the deadline and the time we had staff to start was the 1st of June 19, and we received draft accounts in November 19, which was obviously, the reason why we did not have resource to do the Lewis audit was because the accounts were not, there was not information to enable us to do that audit. The issue then was when we were able to reschedule and start that work, and without predictability and with our peak times, it just wasn't effectively not practical for us to start until the slot that we would normally start the audit in for the following year, and that has been the start of the challenges in this.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, this is issues from some time ago now.
Sorry, Ben. The Eastbourne accounts you received by June, but the Lewis District accounts you didn't get until November. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And there were issues on the other council, but that's a separate matter.
Okay, and in terms of, so I focus on that one for a while, in terms of production of the 1920 accounts, are both Lewis and Eastbourne being produced to the same timescale, Ola and Amira?
The Eastbourne account for 1920, the draft was shared with Deloitte in July. However, we are still dealing with significant issue with Lewis then. That was why we are unable to submit both documents at the same time.
Okay.
Happy? Or
yeah, I'm just kind of intrigued to understand why there's a difference. I mean, it seems, if I understand correctly, it's the same accounting, same finance team. So just slightly concerned around why there seems to be a delay in the production of the Lewis accounts. Maybe, Chair, that's something we could understand at some point, and whether and when they're going to start operating to the same timescale.
okay, thank you. I think if I've read somewhere in our documents, we've employed more audit staff for Lewis. Is that correct? In the last year, that we've got more staff. That you lost someone and you lost a senior member, and then you've got. Am I right or wrong?
In terms of, Amira.
No, you go ahead, Ola, and I probably follow.
In terms of staffing within finance, there have been changes. And I said that changes is something that has been addressed. We've had a lot of skilled accountants joining us, including myself and Andrew, and that has moved stuff on significantly. Yes, initially we had issue with staffing and losing a bit of experience, but since then we have huge skills in place now, and there's been huge increase in terms of a huge improvement in terms of the document that we have produced so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councillor Berman, and then I think where Councillor Berman, mute.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking for the button. Thank you. Actually, my question was dealt with a little bit by Councillor Ross's question and responses, but I still want to dig a little deeper, because I want to know, is the organisation between the shared staffing of the Eastbourne Borough and the Lewis District, does it mean that separate teams do each of the works, or is the load shared equally amongst us between the team for both sides? Could you let me know that, please, through you, Chair, to Ola?
I've got Amira. Do you want to go ahead? Okay.
I think so, Ola, because as you mentioned, and again through you, Chair, I think as Ola mentioned, Ola and Andrew only joined us just over a year ago, and the accounts that we're talking about, 18-19 accounts, were produced by the previous team. And at the time in between 2017, I joined in late 2018 myself. That was the point where the organisation started its fourth phase of transformation, which included the finance team, but not only in terms of the finance team's own restructure in 2018, but also the fact that we had systems transformation And if you recall, part of the delay caused by the introduction of a CX housing system in Lewis, which actually was not introduced in Eastbourne to that effect. And because of that, we had systems implementation issues affecting the Lewis District Council's accounts, which then side by side with the sort of introduction of the shared services created a bit of difficulties. The accounts were draft accounts were ready in June, but since I was quite new, I didn't think I had given it sufficient time to go through the accounts, and we did ask the committee for the accounts to be deferred until November, where I had the chance to go through the accounts and make sure that the set of accounts that we are preparing for the audits are at the quality where we are happy with. And I think that time slot then was given by us, a time slot was given by us by Deloitte, which was November. And unfortunately, that revised time slot was never met, and then ended up with a series of delays in terms of timelines, and of course the most recent one caused by COVID. But I'm hoping that is giving you a little bit of a context that effectively the team who are dealing with the accounts or with the financial matters of the organization are a new team, a very strong team. We have got much higher levels of qualified accountants within the team. And in terms of delivery of the service for two authorities, the resilience of the team actually is greater because we do have a bigger team providing financial services for two authorities. But it does have its own challenges because some of the statutory deadlines are the same, corporate reporting deadlines are the same, so there are competing deadlines in terms of resourcing and capacity. But when I started in October 2018, my aim was that we are going to be having 3 years of transition. And that was before COVID, of course. But I think even though that we are experiencing quite a bit of difficulties and challenges, and every time that we start to sort of see some kind of momentum building, it seems to be hit by yet another event. But we do have a very strong team. We do have a very hard-working team, and it's unfortunate that we are not making. I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry, my Sherry sometimes just steps in and tries to help me out. Apologies for that. But I think I'm just hoping that I've given you enough background information and that kind of recognition that the team that are dealing with the accounts and audit issues and budget issues are a new but very strong team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just round that off a little? So would that mean that the accounts that we're so far behind on were actually started by a separate Lewis team before the conjunction of the two into one department?
I would say actually that was the very first year, first year of finance team operating under a shared service. And the first year where we had a significant reduction in resources from the Lewis team through retirement or just leaving, and a bigger capacity within the Eastbourne team where they were trying to provide services for two authorities. So that was the very first year.
Yeah, that's answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Thank you for your participation and questions and answers. I know we've done this fairly thoroughly now, and I think the committee has got an idea of where this is going in the future. So thank you. I think we'll now go on to agenda item 9. Yes. I'd like to invite the Council's Deputy Chief Finance Officer, Ola, to present the report on behalf of the Chief Finance Officer. This is agenda item 9. Okie dokie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Ola Wolabi, the Deputy Chief Finance Officer. The paper in front of you is the monitoring of our treasury management activities. These activities covers a period of 1st of January and the last day in February. So it's less than 60 days activities. However, it is a requirement under the code to provide an update on treasury management to the committee. And as you know, treasury management is about how do we manage our surplus money? How do we borrow? How do we invest our money? In terms of the fixed term deposits, between 1st of January and the end of February, we only have one, which is with other councils. And in terms of fixed deposits as well, we got 3 to the tune of 16 million. And what that is telling us then in terms of returns, our projected return for 2021, when we agreed the strategy, supposed to be 0.1. However, we are now talking about 0.06. So the return is significantly down. In terms of secured investment, we haven't had any as at 28th of January, at 28th February. And in terms of overall investment positions, there is a graph on section 3, which detail the balances in terms of money market, call account, and fixed investment. These are cumulative figures here. Again, we manage the treasury management in-house, and the principle for us is to be able to secure the capital, ensuring that we've got liquidity, and the yield tends to be the last. And one of the reasons why the interest has been so low, or the rate of return has been so low, is mainly due to the pandemic situation we are going through. The investment rate expectation at the moment is roughly 0.05, if not less. And at a point in time, we are actually talking about negative investment rate. However, the Bank of England believe that might not happen within the next 6 to 12 months. We've seen some money market fund that is actually offering, if not less than 0%, which we don't think is the right thing to do. And what we've added within the document is the interest rate forecast and the economic view. This is provided by our Treasury Management Advisor, which is Link. However, this information is useful in terms of advising officers understanding or helping officers understanding of where to put our money and what risk is out there. I'm happy to say we are in full compliance with the Treasury and Prudential limits. And the only area where we might have some sort of yellow or amber is investment. Investment, the projection is supposed to be 0.1, but we are just talking about 0.06 at the moment. I will stop there, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
A committee, any question? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ola. Yes, and I think the last meeting we did a very rough calculation. So obviously interest rates are low, but I don't think we should dwell there too much, because I think even if it was 0.1%, the expected income would be something like £30,000 a year. So lots of the difference is relatively minor in the grand scheme of our budgets at the moment. The potential indicators is the thing I always look at first. I think I asked for this a while ago, and it's a very useful table, and look at it and sort of see, okay, here are our indicators and they're all green, and that's great. So that's a very helpful table. But when I look at it in a bit more detail, I am a bit puzzled by it. So lots of, the estimate indicator, the authorised limit for external debt, 117.7 million. And then the actual is exactly the same figure. And lots of, that's the case for a lot of them. Lots of the actual is the same as the estimates. And maybe I'm just misunderstanding what this is saying. I would have thought that we would be saying that here's our limit for the debt, and actually, as at the 28th of February, this is our external debt, and I'd be expecting that to be less than the limit. And then also on the maturity structure, for example, lots of I don't quite understand. We've got 75%, lots of 75%, 75%, 100%, 100%. That stupidly adds up to a lot more than 100%. So, if it's lots of, if actually it should be under 12 months and then under 2 years and then under 5 years, maybe that makes sense. But I'm just a little puzzled by what I'm seeing here, and the fact that so many of the the estimates, the actuals are the same as the estimates, just makes me a little confused. So I'm sorry. I just wonder if you could explain that briefly to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Ross. And in terms of the prudential indicators, the authorized limit is the area where we think we do not need to borrow to that level. And I can understand where you're coming from, is that if we have your authorized limit as at in a particular figure, why can't you just tell me where we are at the moment? And it's easy to compare that to the level of gross external debt. Therefore, the 56.6 is what we think we are, where we are at the moment in terms of debt. However, we don't think we will be able to borrow as far as that limit. That limit is mainly there to guide us. It's not an indication of saying you have to borrow to that level. And that is why we ensure that the actual is equal to what we got in terms of target. What we might do going forward is to provide you more analysis in terms of actually for HRA, this is where we are, and for general fund, this is where we are. That might, if you find that useful, I will tweak the next report to actually reflect that. In terms of maturity of fixed borrowing, again, what you've got in there is the upper level. There is no indication that any authority or any council will be able to hit that level, whether 75% or 100%. This is merely for a guide. Where we expect soft area, we expect things to change is something like the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure, we are talking about 11.9 million then. Unfortunately, when we are putting this report together, that information is not available immediately because they're still working on it. And those are the areas where there will be a good indicators in terms of where we are when you compare our strategy to the current monetary report. Thank you.
Thank you. Amira.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Ola, for that explanation. And I probably would add, and I don't know whether this is going to be clarifying the situation or not. Clearly, I think in terms of presenting the information that is going to be helpful, absolutely, your feedbacks are very important to us. Just in terms of clarifying the table, where we talked about authorized limit and operational boundaries, these are targets. So effectively what we are reporting is that whether that maximum amount of authorized limit or operational boundaries, has there been any change for us to revise those limits? And what we're reporting is that the targets that we set is still the target that we are operating within. So effectively, those are the targets, and those targets have been remain as they were. Where you have got differences is actually how we are measuring against those targets, which you can see under the gross external debt, which actually includes that £137 million. It actually includes other debts such as our creditors, which are not included in the other two tables. So I can see how that could be a bit confusing, and it is as if we are actually reporting the actual, but that actual is again is measuring the target. Whether there are any changes which has caused our authorized limit to go above what we reported previously, and this is indicating that note that the authorised limits and operational boundaries remain the same. So I'm hoping that that kind of explanation makes it more clear. But again, it's something that we are very happy to revise if that's going to be improving the ease of use of the table for you.
May I, Chair?
Yeah.
So that's a very helpful explanation. Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying there better. There are still some that surprised me slightly. So moving on to the last two: proportion of financing cost to net revenue stream and proportion of financing cost to general fund and HRA. Lots of again, those to me, they don't seem like limits. So those look like you're either extremely good at estimating or there's something I don't understand there. So maybe, Chair, without trying to take any more time now, maybe that is something that we could look at. So I'd welcome other councillors' thoughts in terms of whether this makes sense to them. Because for me, I kind of feel my duty in some ways to look at this, make sure that everything's green. And if it's green, then I kind of feel confident that, OK, we're all within limits. And that's what I've been doing. But I've been a little kind of, just having looked at it in a little bit more detail, just a bit anxious to sort of say, maybe I'm not really understanding what I'm seeing here. So I don't know whether other councillors feel the same. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may also, I think, Councillor Ross, one thing that we can do is to break down the table into two sections. One is to report to see whether there have been any changes in our targets, in our limits. And the other one would be how actually we measure against those targets, so that by doing that, you actually see the actuals against the revised target or the new target, and any changes, movements from what we had set the target to be at the beginning, and whether those have shifted.
That would help me. Either two parts or possibly an additional column, which was the original estimate indicate, or the original limit, the current limit, and then the actual or something. So so we can see that. But if there's a way to present it that makes it easier for people like me to understand, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I'd just like to ask a question. It's something of a reassurance, really. I have spoken to Ola about this. And I do realise I have read the report, the economic report of what's possibly likely to happen, but there is another situation, and if you could just bear with me a minute on this, that the platforms for the next few years could be interpreted in a different way, that because there's been Joe Biden's going to put $1.3 trillion into the economy, that the benefits of cheap goods from China are now wearing out, so that and that inflation could in fact rise, which would be okay for our general fund, because if inflation rises, interest rates may go up. But the problem with interest rates going up is it could take 1% could roughly take 25 billion out of the economy. Now, that's okay for our general fund. I think I've understood this because we're lending a lot and we could put up interest rates on that. But on the housing revenue account, there's a slight problem, because that money is what we're borrowing. And also it could coincide with, due to COVID, a reduction in the amount of council rents coming in, and possibly that could be squeezed, because if I've understood it, one pays for the other a bit. But if the interest rates go up on the borrowing of that sum, which is about 54 million, and the amount of money we're getting in from rents and other things reduces, that could be, if I mean, I may be totally wrong on this, I'm being gloomy, but we are an audit committee designed to look into this. Is there any sort of, can I have reassurance on this? Or not? I mean, just don't say it won't happen.
So, Chair, in terms of fiscal policies and also interest rates and inflation, those are exact factors that we take into consideration when we set the council's budget. In terms of income that we could generate yield from the treasury investment, that is a very, again, one part of a number of components that goes into formulating the council's financial position. I think I can see how, in some ways, having greater return on investment could be appealing. But when we do have, in terms of provision of our services, rely on contracts and also rely on operational costs that are either directly or indirectly index linked, I think inflation plays this, in terms of increasing our costs, plays a greater sort of, if you like, impact, or puts a greater impact and pressure on our finances than generating a high level of income from our investment. And I also would like us to be reminded that our capital expenditure, capital programme, is significantly is more sizable and more ambitious than it has been possibly in the past. And whilst we haven't undertaken external borrowing so far, if there are going to be any future borrowings, then I guess the cost of borrowing plays a significant role in putting additional demand on our budgetary plans. So it's a complex, multifaceted consideration. And in terms of yield, I think, Councillor Ross, you were absolutely spot on. The difference between 0.6% and 0.8% is really insignificant. I remember in 2008, for every £1 million that you invested, you used to get £50,000. Now, well, insignificant.
I mean, is it possible, since we're talking about this in the HRA, that we could have circulated by email at any rate? I think it would be interesting to know if there's been a reduction in the amount of rent and possibly council tax that we're getting in two. I mean, we've got rent from properties, high street properties, we've got rent from council housing, and we have, yeah, I just said the other thing. If we could see if there has been a reduction in the amount of coming in, because I've heard that property companies have taken quite a hit on their rent, some as much as 45%. So could we have that? Because it will affect, it is to do with risk management, it's to do with the amount of money that's coming in. It may affect us, it may not, but I think perhaps we should be aware of it one way or t'other. Is that possible to do?
Yes, we already have reports, and we'd be more than happy to pull them together, so it gives you specific updates on those key areas that you mentioned.
Thank you very much, and thank you. So we can accept agenda item 9, can't we, committee? Yes? No dissent from that. Thank you. And thank you, Ola, and thank you, Amira. Thank you very much. You've had a long session this time, haven't you? Thank you very much for your work. So we're now going on to something different. Item number 10, the Internal Audit and Counter-Fraud Report for the first 3 quarters of the financial year to the end of 2020. The pages 25 to 40 on our list. And this is, I now invite the Council's Chief Internal Auditor, Jackie Humphrey, to present this report. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is Jackie Humphrey, Chief Internal Auditor. So this first report of mine is the reporting on the work of audit and counter-fraud for the first 3 quarters of the year. And on page 26 at the top, you'll see the list of audit reports that have been issued in final during those 3 quarters and the assurance level that those have been given. One of them is minimal assurance, but all of the ones that are partial or minimal assurance at Appendix A, you will see bullet points giving a brief idea of what the issues were. I would just like to point out that the ones that are annual reviews, so they are the ones that have 1920 in brackets after the names. Because they are annually reviewed, we don't do a follow-up of those. So we are just starting the cycle of the next round of annual audits. And so that's like doing a follow-up on it because we do it the next year. But any of the others we will be doing follow-ups on as they become due. So the one audit report that had minimal was business continuity planning. When I took this report to a corporate management team, they wanted me to point out, and they're quite right, but we're looking at this from two different angles. They wanted me to point out that the council did respond very well to COVID, and our response was timely and very effective in a situation that we just hadn't experienced before, and that is absolutely correct. When we went and did the audit, we were looking for your basically piece of paper that said, in an emergency, this is what we will do to keep the business running. So we didn't find those documents. Didn't mean we couldn't react, it just means we didn't have the documents there. So that's why there's this sort of dual view of this. And of course now is a great time to get your business continuity plans written up because you've been through it, you know what affects you, and you can get them written. So as soon as they're done, that'll move straight away from a minimal assurance. So for the audit team, we've also issued some draft reports during the quarter. They're at the very bottom of page 26. And the team have been working in other areas as well. We go along to meetings about document management, the whole workplace 2021, looking into AI bots that are beginning to be used in IT. At the time I wrote this report, we had 2 vacancies within the audit team. We have now filled one of those vacancies and tried something we've never tried before, training somebody up over Teams, but it seems to have worked well. Our new auditor has picked it up very quickly and is flying, so that's really good news. That will be helping us get along with that. We also have 2 members of the audit team who are undertaking the internal audit practitioner apprenticeship, so that's really bringing them up to speed. It's doing that course really helps you understand where audit fits within the authorities and therefore makes you understand better what you're doing. It really helps put it in place and underline what you're doing and why. So in terms of how we've done against the plan, as I explained last year, we tried something far more flexible so that we could alter audits as we went along. So if anything came up, we would just slot it into the plan. And we were doing it on a percentage basis across the different departments, simply because at the end of the financial year, I have to give an opinion on the internal control environment, and I have to make sure I have a breadth of coverage of audits that we've carried out in order to do that on. As you can imagine, that slightly went out of kilter this year because anything around tourism just shut down. So anything we were doing in the tourism audit area went out the window. And also hearing you asking about reporting and making it clearer, as you were saying about the treasury management and that, I've made some notes myself because we said we'd show how we were doing percentage-wise against what we'd planned, but because of the way it is, it means we will never look like we're achieving it until the last quarter, which doesn't work very well. So I really need to think about how we're going to do that. So at 2.11, you can see how we're doing, but that will, of course, change and should be more up to where it should be by the 4th quarter, except for tourism and enterprise, which is this year is not going to achieve what it should do. Then for counter-fraud work for the first 3 quarters, they've been carrying on pretty much with the work as normal. They've been looking at housing tenancy, right to buy. As you know, we had one big case in Lewis district that went to court. We got the property back and the person was taken to court. There's another one coming up. They've had a hearing on that. The trial is set for December because they're all a bit delayed in the courts as well now, but that could be another big case coming through. They've been looking at housing options, council tax, business rates as well. the biggest piece of work that has grown over this year is the Small Business Grant Fund. Because the grants had to go out very quickly once COVID hit and we got them out, there was a bit of software put in place that did some checking. But when you're trying to get things out that fast, things can't be 100% checked. So we had to make the decision. So we went with the software, which did a great bit of checking, but then we've been doing an awful lot of post-verification work. The fraud team have worked very hard on those and checking them through. And we have had cases where we found they were fraudulent, and we're trying to get the money back from those. But that is a big piece of work that, of course, will continue, because all the time the grants are going out, there's more post-verification work that needs to be undertaken. And that's it really, Chair, for that one. I'll take any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure whether this was you or Ola. I did ask on Friday about 4 o'clock, which is fine, so I'm not moaning about that. I received the Housing CX audit report, and I thought when I read it, it was really quite important, or it was important, not quite. If it is yours, or if there's another officer here, could the committee please be sent it, because it's a major bit of finance. There's quite a lot of money involved in it.
Yes, I can certainly do that. We don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that I thought it was a substantial.
Yes, no, that's fair enough.
What I receive isn't small.
Yes,
but this is.
We don't do it as a matter of course, just so you know, because those audit reports do clearly say where weaknesses are. So we tend not to distribute it too much, because if it gets out, it's telling people how they could defraud the authority if they want, which is why it generally only comes to the chair. But if you ask, I have no problems with passing this one on to the rest of the committee.
And just put confidential on it. I'm sure
I will do so, yes.
Won't pass this on to anyone. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Brett.
Councillor Christine Brett, this is just a clarification, please, Jackie. You've put here that the small business grant, you've investigated and reviewed the sample of grant applications. 150 have been reviewed so far. Can you tell us what percentage of these were found to be fraudulent, please?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head. I will have to ask somebody to come back to you, and I can give you a far more up-to-date figure as well, because I have to write this in advance, so I can tell you about that. Yep. I'm
just wondering what the percentage might be, and whether there's a cause for concern. In fact, we need to do a further sample.
Yes. Oh, they are certainly carrying on work. That was a first tranche of it. So yes, I will get back to you with figures.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. You seem to be doing a better job than Deloitte's in producing work in the COVID era. So thank you for that. Has anyone got anything else to say or to ask about this? Are you expecting an upturn in fraud due to COVID and people running out of money, by the way?
Oh, in any time like this, you expect an upturn in it, yes. And with the speed with which we were asked to send out those grants, and the fact that those grants were in many ways so readily available, then yes, absolutely. The government were pushing us to get those grants out very fast, which I understand people needed the money, but clearly in the speedier you do things, the less checks you're able to undertake. So yes, absolutely, and that's why we're doing the post-verification work on them.
I see. And has there been an uptake in the universal credit during this period that would have an impact on the council?
That I couldn't tell you. I don't deal with that area particularly, so I don't know how that's gone.
Is it possible to find out, because it could affect council?
I could try and find out, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, committee, any questions? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with an apology. My children returned to school today, so I've had more time than usual to look at these reports. So sorry if I'm overdoing the questions today. Jackie, a very helpful report. Lots of you made a point around the reporting. Something that occurred to me was both on this item and the plan for next year. We've got a list of the audits that you've done this year and lots of them, their assurance levels, and a list of the audits you plan to do next year. What I don't see is kind of, I don't know whether you have it, so it's a complete list of all of the areas that could be audited and when they were last audited and which you plan to audit next year and so on. So, are there areas that weren't audited this year, you're not planning to audit next year? Is there a list that we could look at and sort of say, well, actually, that's an area to look at? That's question one. I'm sorry, I should have started as well with thank you for looking at the grants that have come out as COVID. I absolutely agree. I think that's an area we have to look at really closely because it's clearly going to be an area that people take advantage of, lots of given the speed. So thank you very much for doing that. The other thing is there's a very useful summary in, I think it's Appendix A, of lots of the findings from all of the audits. Could I just ask how you follow up on those? Are those recorded as audit points where the corporate management team then have a date by which they need to address those points? Do you track that? And is there a report that we could see in terms of the progress that the corporate management team are making to close the potential issues that you find in the audits? Thank you.
Okay, so on your first part, there is what we call the audit universe, which is a list of all the areas. It's quite a large spreadsheet, but you are more than welcome to see it if you would like to. I could share that with the committee, but just be aware it's a rather large spreadsheet. So that I will make sure gets sent over to you. In terms of follow-ups, what we do is when we've done the final report, there is an action plan at the end of it, which gives the observations of what we found, the recommendation of what we think they should do, and then there is a timescale that we suggest to begin with, and then they agree when they agree the final plan. So that goes out, and then generally 3 months later, I say generally, because some things we know will take a year before they can get done. And so if you've only made 1 or 2 recommendations and it can't happen for a year, then we might not follow it up within 3 months. But generally 3 months later, we go back, we talk to the relevant managers, and if it was something that we can actually test to make sure has been done, we will do some more testing to make sure that recommendation has been put in place. And we will then issue another report based on that. Generally, we only make committee aware if recommendations haven't been addressed when we do the follow-up. So if we do the follow-up and they've been addressed, then you don't get to hear about it. But if we do that follow-up and they haven't been addressed, then that is what Appendix B is, which at the moment hasn't got much in it, but will increase as they come, as we find ones that haven't been addressed when we do our follow-up.
If I could just have a supplementary there, Chair, that sounds great. Thank you. I certainly would be interested to see the audit universe. I don't know whether other councillors would, and maybe, Chair, it might be something to look at a future meeting to kind of sort of see the full list of items when they were last audited, lots of when they're intended to be audited, and so on. And also, I personally would be interested, Jackie, if you were able to share the way in which you track the actions. That's something that would be of interest to me. And again, maybe, Chair, think about whether that's something again that we'd like to have a look at as this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment about that. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just follow up on your interesting answer, Jackie, and Councillor Ross's question. In terms of the audit universe, as you've described it, the potential areas that you could be looking at, who actually decides which ones will be looked at? Where is that decision made?
It's me and the audit manager generally, and that's why in the report you will see in a moment that I'll come to, that draft plan for the following year. It's taken to corporate management team and it's brought to you so that you can comment if you feel I've missed something important off of it. That's
all I needed to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I mean, I would like to thank you for this, Jackie. I'm rather worried that the last few agendas have been rather nice and concise, and if they're filled, if they get to about 150 pages of things, information, I think it gets a bit difficult. I mean, I'm quite happy that this information is distributed outside the agenda, and then if councillors want to pick something out, maybe they could pick something out. I don't know what the committee thinks about this. I'm just a wee bit wary. I'm happy that the information is distributed. Any comments from anyone?
I think that's a very good idea, Chair, that these are circulated to us and then we can decide whether to bring them forward to the agenda.
If there's something outstanding queries. Councillor Ross, do you find that helpful? And then I'll go to Hamira, who probably...
Yeah. As you wish, Chair. I think it'd be helpful if we could see them, and then, as Councillor Berman suggests, maybe decide whether we'd like to have a specific discussion on it. Thank you.
Okay. Is that practical, Hamira? And Jack?
Thanks, Chair. I think Jackie, since last year, has adopted a risk-based approach and a very flexible approach that actually is helping to design her audit plan very much in line with the sort of changing risk profile of different control areas. But I suppose one of the things that we can look into jointly with Jackie to designing is that in allocating her team's time, maybe we can actually make an allocation for the committee so that you can actually have that kind of, if you like, zoom into specific areas. So an assessment of Jackie's audit plan for the year ahead and the areas that then you would like to have a more of a sort of, if you like, deep dive look. And maybe that would be something for the committee to make a decision as to which areas they would like to be included or added to the sort of list of routine internal audit and internal control checklist.
Okay, I'm happy. I mean, I'm very happy that the agendas aren't huge, because it's easier to. Being human beings and councillors, it's easier to concentrate on one that's sort of more concise, and I think Jack has achieved that. But if there's things that we need to know, because I think we need to know them, so it's a tricky balance. Are you happy with that, officers?
Yeah. I think we can take that away and come up with the proposals for you, Chair and committee members to have a view. But I have got a number of models from my previous authorities that worked quite efficiently and effectively, so we can actually test those.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Ross. Jackie, I've got one question myself which you'll be able to clear up very quickly. It's on page 37 and it's about Zurich. I mean, we were informed a while ago that Zurich were going to be helping us with our risk assessments. And it says here, currently in discussion with Zurich to arrange training, will begin at senior management level. I presume the training will start at senior management level. Is that?
Yes, sorry. Please forgive me. I had my injection over the weekend and my brains had been a little bit foggy from it. So I missed doing that bit. Sorry. So yes, the original plan was that Zurich came and looked at what we were doing and they were going to give us training. Now, with all the COVID thing, I found they were supposed to be coming back to me with some information that they didn't. And then I sat there and I mulled it over, and you should never give me time to think about anything because I will rethink it and come up with something different. And I was thinking about how with training in the past, it is very difficult. If you have a set day and a set time for doing a piece of training, not everybody can attend it. And quite often you find the people who really need to attend it are the ones who don't get to it. And I was thinking to myself, this is going to be another problem again. And do we arrange a few sessions, and how will that work, and the cost of it? And then an email came around just after I had written this report from our HR section about the OLLI online courses that we have. So they're set, and you go in and you do them when is convenient to you. But equally, we can make some of them mandatory, and we can monitor who actually does them. So I am now in discussions with HR about how we can do one of these for our risk management, and then I will be able to monitor who does it and insist that everybody does it, and then we'll know when everybody has, and they will all have had the same piece of training. So that's the way I'm looking at it now.
Thank you for that. And incidentally, I hope you do feel okay. The objection. I certainly did. I was cock a hoop at getting it.
Oh, I'm happy. It's just made me really tired.
Yeah, I've heard that. It does. So thank you for coming along today.
That's all right.
Okay then. So the committee, we've had a chat about this, and we've had comments, and we note the report, don't we? Is the report noted, Bev? Okay, thank you. Right. Agenda item 11, the Strategic Risk Quarterly Review, pages 41 to 54. Jackie?
Thank you.
Invite comments from you.
Jackie Humphrey, Chief Internal Auditor. So this report is the quarter review of the Strategic Risk Register. Every quarter I take it to corporate management team, and if there are any changes then I report it to committee, although you can ask for it at any time you wish, but it generally only comes to you when there have been changes. So it was reviewed at the end of January, and it was agreed that sorry, as I say, brain not quite in gear. There was no mention concerning the financial impact of COVID-19, and also that was the bit I missed about the Brexit issues around New Haven Harbour. So it was agreed to reduce the scores for the risk council economically less stable, and changes in demands and expectations could be reduced. And then for the COVID-19, a description was added to the risk changes to the economic environment that mentioned the significant impact on the council's finances, and added an extra control about the reduces likelihood. And so that's been added into the risk register. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Comments from committee? I mean, I must say it is rather worrying that there are so many ambers and reds, as would be predictable. I just, I mean, because most of these are due to external things, are the controls, let's put it easier than that. When are they going from red to amber and amber to green? Or are they just, or are these risks so substantial that they could derail everything? Because there's a lot of them, aren't there?
Yes, I think at the moment we're being very cautious, because with COVID and all the financial implications and that around COVID, as I say, it's something nobody's experienced before. We don't know where it's going, and certainly at the time we were considering this, we hadn't had that agreement from MHCLG about what was happening. So we were keeping leaving the risk scores high simply so that we are keeping an eye on them rather than sitting back and saying, well, we think it's going okay at the moment, until we really know how it's going. Corporate management team just agreed that the risk scores needed to be left high. I don't know if Hamira wants to comment on that, being a member of CMT.
Thanks, Jackie. Chair, I think it's just stating the obvious that we can't avoid risk, and risk is part of the sort of day-to-day life. So this process is trying to kind of highlight the severity and exposure levels to various risks. Some existing risk, I don't think we've introduced anything new, but what we've tried to do is to sort of give you an update as to how they appear in the corporate management, if you like, priority list, and in terms of what actions management team and organisation is putting in place to mitigate and manage them. For instance, the finance risk actually, in comparison to the last time you received the report, has gone down from 25 to 20. And the reason for that is that now we've got a greater degree of certainty that the impact of COVID, it is manageable within the organization's operations and financial resources. So this is really just to give you an update as to where the management focus and the organization focus is on what risks, how do we measure them, and what actions are we putting in place to mitigate and manage them. But in terms of some of the risks, I suspect that some of them would never be green, but what degree of, if you like, management focus is put to make sure that they are managed on an ongoing basis. I suspect financial, for instance, financial risk is going to be read for quite a while, and that is giving us the, if you like, focus that we need to plan to make sure that it's high in the organizational risk assessment agenda, and also is driving organizational decision making.
Yes, thank you. That's answered it. So really, the point is that under internal controls, you're attempting to mitigate the risks and reduce the risk as much as you can, and that if there were another colour, indigo, it would end up as indigo, and that the risks are actively being reduced if possible, or the internal controls are the mitigating factors, you hope.
That's absolutely right.
Well, thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, so on item number 11, we've received the report and noted the update. How's the committee? Are we all happy with that? Yes, yes. Good. Right, now we're on to agenda item 12. Jackie Humphrey, the draft internal report on pages 55 to 64. Come to the end. We've just got to consider and agree the proposed plan. So your report again.
Thank you, Chair. Jackie Humphrey, Chief Internal Auditor. Yes, so this is the draft plan for the next financial year, and I think this is where you've raised some issues already, so this may be where you want to bring out more of those questions. So as I say, we have to do a breadth of coverage, so we've worked out the departments across the authorities and what percentage they are of the whole of the authorities, and therefore we've worked out their percentage, and we split the time we have in audit according to those percentages and allocate audits within those percentages. And this is the way we're trying to be more flexible, so that we have those percentages, we have those number of audit days we're going to spend in those areas. And so if during the year something else more important comes up, we can slot it into that area and take out one of the audits that perhaps we've already got in the plan. We also have to bear in mind that we are paid to do some time for Eastbourne Homes, and we are also paid to do some audit time for South East Environmental Services Limited. So that's taken out of our full allocation, although we did take on some extra resources when we took those on, so it doesn't take away from the time for the councils. And also we have to take away non-chargeable, so leave, sick leave, things like that we have to take out. And also we have the managed audits, or annual audits as I tend to call them, that have to be done every year. I don't actually show them in the plan because we have to do them every year. So they're the ones, payroll, debtors, creditors, all the main functions of finance. But on Appendix B, you will see what we have planned. So we went through this audit universe list. We looked at ones that we thought were very relevant at the moment. So you will notice in here that we've got a few things around COVID. We're going to have a look at furloughing, cybersecurity during COVID, the HR new ways of working as well, to make sure all that's up to date. We've also taken on board that there are green issues around, so we're looking at pollution regeneration projects. We've certainly made sure that there are areas that are particularly Lewis that we're looking at, as well as particularly Eastbourne. So you'll see we're going to look at the community wealth building, and we're going to have a look at the Lewis waste services. We've also borne in mind things around Brexit, so the IT post-Brexit arrangements, because rules have changed now we've come out of the EU around there. So we've tried to cover a range of things in the hope that we're covering all the issues that are necessary at the moment. And as I say, this is your chance to have a look at this and say, no, there's an area that I think is a higher risk that should be in here. Because as I say, this is the plan we will do if nothing else comes up. If something comes up during the year, I mean, much like COVID did last year, something comes out of the blue, then we can slot it in here and perhaps not do one of the ones that are on here. So this is what we will do should nothing else happen. So really, I'm just either asking you to agree it or to let me know if you think I've missed anything out of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillors? Councillor Ross.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you, Jackie. So firstly, when does this plan need to be finalised? So what's the timescale for us to respond in terms of what else we might like to see on it? Obviously, that would tie in with the audit universe. If it was possible for us to receive the audit universe, so essentially we can see the things that you've decided not to audit, and that's sort of think about whether we would prioritise any of those above any of these. That would be really helpful. But sorry, the question around the date first of all.
It literally starts 1st of April. We would start working on this. So as long as it's before then, that's fine.
Okay, so then the mechanism would be we'd feed back. I think, Chair, that there is going to be another meeting prior to the 1st of April. So would we all feed back to you directly, Jackie? Would we need to keep the Chair informed of our comments, or how would that work?
I would probably suggest it goes through the Chair as well, just so that it's clear. But yes, I mean, if they are reasonable things for us to order, I see no reason why we shouldn't. So yes. Like I say, I would suggest keeping the Chair informed, but it also it doesn't have to be by the 1st of April. If something comes up during the year, then at any point you can say that's the whole point of making this flexible. It does mean that before we used to have a set plan, and then when other things came up, we were always reporting that we weren't meeting the plan, which was silly because we were doing things that were important, but showing that we weren't performing how we should. So the whole point of this is so that it is far more flexible and we can change as circumstances change.
Thank you, very helpful. And just one supplementary comment. Obviously, it'd be great to see the audit universal, so I'll get you some comments prior to the 1st of April. One immediate area that comes to mind, there's been a lot of concern recently around litter collection, primarily seemingly from the ID Verde contract, lots of which obviously recently changed from Burley's. And lots of, I think that's an area that I know that a number of councillors in Lewis in particular would welcome somebody to look at that, if that is that the sort of thing that could be in scope. Can
I just check, when you say litter collection, do you mean fly tipping or just general litter collection?
So there are some specific areas of Lewis where I think ID Verde are sort of responsible for collecting litter from mauling fields, for example. And lots of people complaining, just saying the litter problem is a lot worse than it's been historically. So that's an area it might be good to see whether ID Verde are performing as well as Burley's did previously.
Yep, that's something we could look at. Yep.
Thank you.
And that could be right across Lewis district, could it? Or not? I mean, it just doesn't have to be Lewis, does it?
Yeah, sorry, my parochial interest here, but I wasn't intending it for just to be solely looking at their performance in Lewis.
Yeah, that was fun.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone anything else to say? Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Jackie, I'm just wondering, sorry, going back to your Appendix A report, where you've got partial assurance levels, you've included in your audit rechargeable repairs and leaseholder management, but you haven't put business continuity planning and procurement. Now, procurement, that's a big, to me, I was going to bring it up, but I thought, well, no, I'll wait till you do your follow-up on that to see what comes out of it, because that was quite staggering when I read that, the procurement, to be frank.
Right, sorry.
I'm wondering if we could have some sort of internal audit on that, because as I say, the partial minimal on all of your previous report, you've got 2 of them on, but you haven't got business continuity and procurement. So I'm just wondering if we want to maybe just allocate a small amount of time on that.
Oh, right, sorry. So on ones that we've already audited, you mean? Yes. So we will follow those up. So we won't. The plan is for a whole new audit. Follow-ups automatically get done anyway. Yes, fine. Sorry. So they don't appear on the plan. There is time set aside to do those. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, they just made it clear. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yes, because I know the procurement has been looked at, hasn't it?
Mm.
Yes, so we will definitely be following that up. Yes.
You have done that. Okay, so we note and accept this report and thank Jackie.
Thank you.
Please. Right. I think I need some water. Agenda item 13 is the date of the next meeting. It's due to commence on 10 a.m. Monday, 26th of July. This may depend a bit on what we hear from Deloitte, of course, if they've managed to complete their 18-19 audit when they say and the other 2. But at the minute, the next meeting's in July. That's okay? I'd like to thank everyone, the officers, for being here. It's been quite a long meeting, but I think we've raised the committee's raised some really good points, and I think a lot of them have been answered reassuringly. So I'd like to thank the officers too, because I know they're working under these COVID restrictions and getting things done, where other organisations seem to be dragging their feet. So thank you. And that's the end of the meeting at 11:58. Thank you for coming. Thank you.